Yeah, safety.
Megan was also at the Spur Park.
Okay. Well, with all the commissioners here, good evening and welcome everyone. I will now call to order the May 24th meeting of the Albany Planning and Zoning Commission. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Could we please have a roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Donaldson.
Here.
Commissioner Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Kent.
Here.
Commissioner Minotti.
Here.
Chair Geeson Fields.
Present. All right. And so the first item up is our consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and/or administerial. Thus, everything on the consent calendar will be considered and voted on by a single vote of the commission. A consent calendar item may be pulled and discussed separately if someone from the audience or a commissioner would like to remove an item for discussion. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing.
I just wanted to mention,
Yes.
I left some moderately revised meeting minutes on the dais. Commissioner Minotti had emailed in comments, which we've incorporated into the draft for your review. So
Okay. And that's.
that's, yeah.
Okay. Okay, and let's see here. So no one from the audience would like to pull anything? Okay, I'm going to see, is there a commissioner who'd like to pull an item from the consent calendar? I just have one correction to the minutes for April 12th, 2017. If you want, I can just, is it okay if I just tell that to you?
If it's a simple correction.
Yep, I
happy
think
to
it's
make it.
a change of one word. On page 5, line 42, I wanted to change the or to an and. Prepare an alternative scheme minus the lower level and prepare an alternative scheme.
Okay, yep, we can incorporate that.
Okay, with that, there are no commissioners who'd like to pull an item. I'm open to a
I'll
motion.
move the consent calendar items.
Okay, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
There's been a second. All right, a motion and a second to approve consent calendar items. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, meeting minutes for April 12th and April 26th have both been approved. Excuse me, and our next item up is the public comment period, which is available for anyone desiring to address the commission on an item that is not on the agenda. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and under the Brown Act, the commission is only able to receive the public's comments since the item is not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are referred to staff for their comments and may be included in a future commission agenda. Is there anyone who'd like to address the commission?
Yep, we
Please.
have a speaker card from Mr. David Garner.
All right, great.
My name is David. This is my daughter, Tall. We live right behind 1495 Solano Avenue with Orange Theory Fitness and some restaurants. Anyway, I've been here before complaining about the noise. It has not diminished. It has not ceased. It's something we live with every day. My daughter is affected more than me, but these are emails that I have sent to them. Very, very rarely do I get a reply. They seem to not show any concern about our quality of life, just about making profit. I've looked on their website trying to get a corporate phone number. You can look yourself, I couldn't find it. So she's here to explain how it affects her, but it's just something that we would like to be able to get back to live a decent life, because besides the noise, we also put up with the trash there. I've got pictures of a dumpster that came down and almost hit my car. The fire department had to come out and clean it up. Police department came out, and there was a witness that saw the dumpster rolling from the waste area at the restaurant. So these are things that just compound the living there. I realize that this is something we have to deal with, but this is something that should be able to stop as well as the trash.
Okay, so I live in the bedroom right next to the outside area of Orange Theory Fitness. So I am able to hear the noise the most, and I've been woken up at 6 a.m. from thuds and booming from I don't know what. Like it feels like there's like 100 people jumping at one time or something. There's also noise, like yesterday I came back from a trip and I just wanted to go to sleep early so I could wake up for my final today. And there was noise at like 8 or 9 p.m. Sounding like construction, but it was the booming again and I couldn't fall asleep. And then a couple weeks ago, for instance, I was writing my 10-page essay for class, and I had to stop writing it because it was so loud that I could not focus on my paper. And I had to stop writing until the class was over, and I was in my room, and I feel like at that point, like, I should be able to have peace and quiet in my own bedroom writing an essay. And it's kind of ridiculous that I'm not able to get that quiet in my own bedroom.
I would like to say something. The thud or booms, they're not really super loud, but they're consistent. And you never know when they're going to happen, like somebody's dropping something.
Weights or something, I don't
Have
know.
any of you been in the military? I've been to Vietnam. I'm familiar with the noise that sounds like. And I was taking a shower one time right there, and I heard it, and my heart started pounding. I don't want to hear it. I don't live there for that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. It's okay.
Remember it.
Thanks for your comments. We can't take action on it right now, but I actually have asked in other meetings for what's happening, and the report was it's not going well, so. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in the audience who would like to address the commission on an item that is not on our agenda tonight? Okay, seeing no one, I will close the public comment period and move on to our action items. Our first item is PA 17-010, design review for a second-story addition and secondary residential unit at 1024 Evelyn.
Once again, this is planning application 17010, design review for a second-story addition and second unit located at 1024 Evelyn. Excuse me. Background on the property: the subject property is a 5,000 square foot lot with an existing 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 862 square foot home built in 1938. City records show minor work done to the home in the past. This includes new sewer lateral, tear off and re-roof of the roof, sewer replacement in 2000. The home was sold to the current homeowner in February of 2016. Here's a street view of the.
Are we able to pull it up on the screen, please?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. This is the street view of how the house looks today. Project request. The applicant is seeking approval for design review approval for a 690 square foot second story addition that includes a new master suite, an additional bedroom, bathroom, and laundry room. They're also requesting approval for a 645 square foot secondary residential unit on the ground floor. Previous commission review. On April 12, 2017, the commission reviewed the project and expressed concerns about the following: the second story bay window above the existing ground floor bay window, replicating the lower gable over the upper bay window, and changing the siding on the upper level addition. Design refinement. Since the April 12th Planning and Zoning Commission hearing, the applicant has made the following refinements to the project. They've changed the upper addition's siding to vertical wood paneling. They've changed the upper bay window to a square bay projection with a gable roof of similar size and shape of the one on the ground level. They've added square bays on the west side of the home or the rear side of the home, and the overall building has been increased by 3 inches. 2 skylights are proposed on the roof of the second story addition as well. Here's the existing elevation. Here's what was previously proposed, and here's what's proposed before you today. And then the architect has also included some 3D renderings to help illustrate that space. And here's another one with the square base, and then one from this side. Parking. The property has an existing two-car garage at the rear of the home. One additional off-street parking space is proposed to be located on the existing driveway. This results in 2 off-street parking spaces for the property. And here's the landscape plan showing improvements to the landscaping on the site. No correspondences have been received for this project. This project is categorically exempt from CEQA. And recommendation, staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review and approve the proposed project subject to the attached findings and conditions of approval. That's it.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions of staff for this project?
Just to clarify, my math might have been wrong, but did you say it results in 2 or 3 off-street parking spaces?
Right now, the way they have this laid out, there would be 1 covered parking space in the garage and then 2 tandem spaces in the driveway.
Okay, so 3
About
total.
half the two-car garage is being converted to a shop.
Got it.
Yeah.
The requirement is only for 2, though.
The requirement is only for 2,
2 covered.
two cars, 2 to serve the main house. The second unit is within a half-a-mile radius of transit, so pursuant to state law, there is no parking requirement for that unit.
And so then I'm assuming the exception then is basically because they have to have 2 covered.
Nope, there is no exception with this. It's just
Oh,
a
okay.
simple design review.
Okay.
Parking requirement.
Are there any other questions of staff? Seeing none, I will open up to the public, actually, sorry, to the applicant. If you'd like to present your project to the commission, explain anything that sort of guided you or responses that you did in terms of our comments. I know most of us are familiar, but we do have a new commissioner here tonight, and so to make sure we're all.
I think Christopher already went over what we did, and we just tried to respond to some of your comments and also stick with the program of the owner. That's where we are right now.
Okay. Are there any questions of the applicant?
No, I don't have any.
No? Okay. Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I will open up to the public. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on this item? Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for a full discussion. If there's a commissioner who'd like to start, feel free.
I guess I could. I think the applicant has been very responsive to our comments at the past meeting, and I'm really quite happy with the way the design looks right now. And glad to see the story poles up. So I don't really have any problems with it. Yeah, I don't think I have any further comments.
I was just going to add, I'm very appreciative of the fact that they were responsive to us and made all the corrections we asked for. And when you're ready, I'm prepared to move this.
Okay.
I thought it now looks so obvious. We were struggling over before you had the same. You'd mirrored the detail on the first floor and the second floor, and we were struggling over why that didn't work. But now it's so obvious because it was really just taking away from the first floor, which is kind of a unique character.
That's right.
So now that you've done this,
I think
you
you're right.
simplify the second floor. It really refocuses on the entry.
That's
and
right.
really brings it
I
together.
think that's a good comment, yeah.
And I'm late to the party here, but I did read up on your project, and it also appeared to me that you were responsive in dealing with the comments that came up at the last review, and it seems like there should be no issues in making all the findings.
Yeah, and I concur with the other commissioners' comments. I appreciate the 3D rendering. It helps put the massing of the project into perspective. And as I said, I am very appreciative of your responsiveness to our comments. So with that, I'm open to a motion.
I'll move approval of planning application 17010, design review for second-story addition and a secondary residential unit at 1024 Evelyn.
Is there a second?
A second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, your project has been approved by the commission, and there is a 14-day appeal period, so please do not make any definitive moves or remove any story poles until after those 14-day appeal period is over. Otherwise, your project has been approved. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yep. Good luck. All right, our next item is planning application 16-070, design review and parking exception for a second-story addition at 937 Polk.
So some background on the property at 937 Polk. The subject property is an existing 3,100 square foot lot with an existing 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom, 910 square foot home built in 1924. City records show that in 2008, the current homeowners applied and received approval for a 1,000 square foot second-story addition. The addition matched the existing McGregor details currently featured on the home. The plans were never pursued by the applicant and the applicant abandoned the original project scope. Here's a street view of what the property looks like today on Polk. Project requests. The applicant is requesting design review and parking exception for a second-story addition at 937 Polk. The project scope includes excavation of the existing lower level, adding 690 square feet of new living area. That includes a new living room, family room, bathroom, and 2 bedrooms. Reconfiguring the main floor to accommodate for an open floor plan remodel. An 867 square foot second-story addition that includes a new master suite, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. This particular scheme will result in a 5-bedroom, 4.5-bathroom, 1,700 approximately square foot house. Here's an existing elevation of the home. Here was what was proposed in 2008, and that was approved. And here's what's proposed before you tonight. Revisions. This project was last seen by the commission at the April 12th P&Z commission hearing. Since then, the applicant has done the following. They've refined the FAR to be compliant with the residential site regulations and have included the previously approved plan set from 2008 for the commission to review for comparative purposes. April 12, 2017 review. The commission was split on their support of the project by 2-2. 2 commissioners expressed a lack of support for the lower level scheme and had concerns about precedent setting. 2 commissioners requested an alternative plan be prepared with tandem covered parking as a potential scheme for approval. The commission could continue the matter to a date uncertain pending on attendance of the 5th commissioner with the tie-breaking vote. Lower level excavation. The applicant is proposing to excavate the lower level of the home approximately 3 feet 6 inches to gain legal ceiling height in the lower floor. The entire home is proposed to be lowered into the excavated area to achieve an average perimeter height of 4 feet 9 inches. Today, the existing average perimeter height is at 5.37 feet. The applicant is exempting the proposed lower level of the floor from the FAR calculations. And here's the proposed section illustrating that. Section 2024-050 states any covered area on or below the first or main floor shall be considered a story and shall be calculated in the floor area ratio if the average height of the perimeter is greater than 5 feet, except a single parking area may be excluded as provided in paragraph B1B above. Measure of height shall be taken from the lower of natural or finished grade at the exterior to the top of the finished floor on the first story or main story above. The existing, once again, the average perimeter height is 5.37 feet. Previously approved lower level exemptions. The intent of provision section 2024-050 is to recognize existing conditions where subterranean conditions and grade challenges exist. Previously approved projects had lower levels exempted from FAR calculations due to the existing subterranean conditions and site conditions, which included significant grade challenges. These existing site conditions were not altered to exempt the space. City attorney review. The commission asked for the city attorney to weigh in on the average perimeter height calculations and the previously designed light well. He noted that the calculations were mechanical. If the calculations are taken from finished grade, the area in question could be subject to the code provision. A commissioner requested that staff check with the city attorney in regards to the commission's discretion to require changes to the lower level space if the commission cannot make findings for approval. He noted that the commission has discretion to require elimination of the lower level space based on the city's past interpretation of pertinent code section, combined with the inherently discretionary nature of design review approval. Anecdotal background, the commission asked staff to do some additional research on the history of this code provision and the intent behind it. Staff conferred with David Arkin, a local architect, resident, and former planning commissioner who served the zoning Code Committee in 2004. He indicated that the intent behind Code Section 2024-050 was to create flexibility, giving homeowners the option to build up or down when considering a home expansion.
I just realized I forgot to bring out the copies off of the printer. But I had also forwarded it to the commission earlier in the day.
Give it to us.
I have it.
The full excerpt of his recollection is on the dais and available at the back of the room as well. Parking, there's an existing single attached car space that provides one off-street parking space for the home. The applicant applied for a parking exception to provide additional required off-street parking space in the front yard setback. The proposed driveway measures 17 feet wide by 23 feet 1 inches in length. The tandem parking scheme provides 2 off-street code compliant spaces. Landscaping, the applicant has submitted a landscaping plan illustrating the proposed improvements to the existing home. These improvements include a new pergola at the rear of the home, concrete pavers, drought-tolerant plants, permeable pavers at the front of the home for the proposed off-street parking spaces, and a variety of vegetation at the front of the home to complement the proposed remodel. And here's the floor plan, or the landscape plan illustrating those changes. And then here's the lower level bedroom plan that's been proposed originally. Here's what the commission requested, a tandem parking space floor plan scheme that includes the home theater and the new proposed gym room as well. And then this is showing the same scheme essentially, but with unfinished storage and where the old theater and gym room were proposed in the previous slide. This is just the floor area ratio table that shows that they brought the floor area ratio into compliance with Albany zoning code. And no correspondences have been received for this project by staff. This project is categorically exempt from CEQA. And recommendation. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Commission review the proposed plans and provide feedback to the applicant and staff. Draft findings and conditions of approval are included should the commission decide to take action. The commission effectively has 4 options for approval and may direct staff to make the findings for the following options. 1, approve the project with the original configuration. 2, approve the tandem parking scheme. 3, approve the lower level unfinished storage. 4, approve the project and require the applicant to eliminate the lower level entirely, resulting in a 2-story home. And if the applicant is not satisfied with these options, the commission may direct staff to make findings of denial, and the applicant may appeal to the city council. That's it.
Chris, one question. Could you go back to the landscape plan? That's not the same plan I got in my package. That one. So that shows a kind of a cut through from the walkway over to the driveway, which is recessed. The package plan is different.
On the north side?
On the west side, well, right on the south side of the car, there's a little way you can get out of the car.
Where this planter is?
Yeah, there's a little different configuration from what was in the set.
Yeah, I think that landscape plan has changed. It has 2 cars side by side in the driveway.
Right, that's right, yeah.
And two tandem in underneath, I think.
That's
Here we go.
there's the road, okay.
That's it.
Sorry, my apologies. I
That's it.
forgot to change that in the slide.
Christopher, I had 2 questions. One, can you just clarify, you had said it does meet the FAR, but under the interpretation if we don't count the space underneath, right?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
And then the second question was, there were 3 options that were laid out, and I appreciate the fact they gave us 3 options, but the FAR, there was only one table showing the FAR, and each of the sheets showed the same. So is that because the part, under one scenario, there's one space, under another scenario, there's a tandem, and our FAR only exempts one space for one car? Is that why doesn't the FAR change between the various options?
The FAR doesn't change because effectively they're taking the same exemption in all 3 scenarios. Because
Exempting
it's,
the whole lower level.
yeah, it's below grade.
And in our code, though, for the FAR, we exempt space for one car? Or is that not, am I interpreting
We
that
exempt
wrong?
space for up to one covered parking space to 220 square feet, but in a situation where this average perimeter height comes into play, the entire area could be exempted regardless of the interior programming.
All right, thank you.
Could you go back to the beginning, the first couple of slides? So I want to go a little bit more into how you calculated the existing height of that first floor. You said it's 5.37 feet, I think.
Oh, yes, so what
that
we did,
calculation. Now,
Yeah.
the plans show it at, it looks like 4.4 feet 9 inches, I think, and it for the plate, from the ground to the plate level, it's within a few inches on each corner anyway. So where'd the 5.37 come from? Is that because of the garage then?
no, so we effectively took a scale, applied it to the existing elevation drawings, and took those measurements, and that's how we came up with the 5.37 feet.
I'm sorry, say again, tell me again.
Yeah, so in the design review package, we took the existing exterior elevations, put a scale on there, noted what those heights were from the grade to the finished floor, and took the average perimeter height based on
So
those
you did it on a
measurements.
full-size set of plans?
Mm-hmm.
And does that mean that the numbers that we're seeing on some of our elevations in the plans that we have are you disagree with those numbers, or they're?
Oh, I'm not disagreeing with them. In identifying that 5.37 feet, we were simply trying to raise the point that based on existing conditions, that exemption doesn't apply.
Doesn't apply because
So-
it's a couple of inches too tall. If
Right,
it's-
so
It has to be under 5 inches.
right, with what they're proposing, they do come out to an average perimeter height that is less than 5 feet.
And
but-
how do they get there? Because it looked to me like the elevation of the first floor doesn't drop, or does it?
It does. They're excavating and then lowering the house in to get that average perimeter
That's what I
height
thought
less
the
than 5
first time
feet.
around, and then I didn't see that when I was looking at the plans this time, so.
Because you know that rock, the zinc rock is thick, it's 1 feet taller than the rest of the house.
Right, right. There's the plate level of the existing house, the first floor there, and then the garage has a higher plate level, yeah. Yeah.
Doug, what are you looking at to get the 5.37?
I was looking at this first set right here on the staff report. The existing average perimeter height is 5.37. Okay, that's staff's calculation.
And that's based on the conditions as they exist today, if you were to
Today.
go out there and take those
Today.
measurements.
And you, and correct me if I'm wrong, you got yours from literally taking an architect's scale,
And putting them on the
putting it on
plans.
the hard.
Putting them on the plans.
Okay. Which I will just say, my own caveat is that I know when we do drawings, we always say to contractors, never scale off the drawings, just because there are discrepancies that happen with printing and things like that, and architect scales aren't exactly exact.
Right.
And so there can be a margin of error there.
Well, it's really tight. It's really close, and it's a problem for me. Yeah. So.
Are there any other questions of staff before I?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. I'm just going back to the initial statement that the plans were revised to be compliant with FAR. Can you just clarify what changed from the original? You don't have to be super exact. I'm just curious what they did to bring it within that code exemption.
I mean, if you want, I can give a stab too.
Well, that's
I mean,
kind of the question on the table. Are they within that code exemption or not?
Right, well,
I
yeah,
think
so there's the interpretation or intent question as well, but I'm just curious what changed from the previous submittal?
Well, I mean,
The only
I know
thing that's
originally-
changed is the addition of parking.
Well, when they originally submitted this to have the full basement excluded from the FAR, there were a few accessory items which affected the measurement of where the lowest point of the finished grade was. So that, for instance, they had a couple light wells that were off of it. They also had some stairwells to the side on the side yard, and then they also had I think a an exit in the back of it. So that effectively lowered the finished grade of those areas to where
Okay.
you'd have like 8 feet or so. And so we gave them some recommendations for that, and that also included, I believe, 1 covered parking space in the basement level. And so I gave some recommendations, or we gave some recommendations for them to remove those items so that it'd have a more uniform finished grade at the 5-foot area, because those other ones and they also had a secondary entrance in the front of the building.
Okay,
So all those things sort of effectively made the finished grade much taller than.
I see. Okay,
Within the
so
5
there were
feet.
some meaningful adjustments, but,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about the other projects that have been approved using this exemption from the FAR calculations. And I'm just curious, and again, not to put you on the spot with numbers, but if, for those other projects, if you had calculated in the, below grade areas, what kind of FAR would it have been? Are there any precedents where the true FAR really ends up more like 0.77 like we're seeing here? Or is this?
That's a really
on the
good
high end?
question. I'm just kind of going back in my head thinking where this provision has been applied, where the exemption, the lower level area has been exempted. And to be honest with you, I don't think it's actually resulted in projects that exceed a 0.55 for the most part. We had a project at 1104 Pomona where there was a 2-car garage that was effectively dug into the front, and the house is way above the street. All that really did was exempt the garage because the average perimeter height was much less than 5 feet. We had a project on Key Route, kind of a similar situation. The garage was on grade, dug into a fairly steeply sloped lot. And I think altogether, it was under the 0.55. It was just a simple lower level conversion within the existing building envelope. So in general, when that provision has come into play and a property owner has been able to excavate and create habitable area, it really doesn't result in the FAR exceeding 0.55, strictly based on the lot area and mechanical
Right.
calculations.
Okay. So from the findings that were provided to us, the draft findings, it looks like those apply, specifically to the applicant's preferred scenario, right?
Right.
So we didn't get draft findings for the alternative scenarios.
Right, and in general, if there were findings for the alternative scenarios, one that would result in a denial, that's typically something we ask you to give us some guidance, and then we would come back at a
Okay.
future hearing date with that crafted for your consideration.
Okay. And so I had one question about, and sorry, I did not bring everything with me, but one of the findings relating to the parking exception said, you have to make a finding that the front yard projection is within certain width and length restrictions. And it looks like the findings you provided indicate that finding cannot be met. That was my interpretation of the facts. And I was just curious what your opinion was.
So we have provisions within the parking code that establish uncovered parking space size. And so the minimum size for a new parking space is 8.5 feet in width by 18 feet in length. The minimum space for a side-by-side pad is 16 by 18. Based on the dimensions of the plan, they actually do have room to provide that. The issue is that it's located in the front yard setback, which our code does not allow by right. The planning
Right.
commission has to make the findings.
But my question is that, so where it says the proposed driveway measures 17 feet by 23 in length, my understanding is that you have to make a finding that, so even if we are granting the parking exception, that the projection can only be limited to a certain width and length within the front yard.
Right. Yeah.
And this would exceed those numbers, right?
Yeah, it would exceed that, although that's typically okay. Most times, we're looking at actually reduced spaces rather than spaces that exceed the minimum width and length.
Got it, okay. So
Concern
it's a
about
minimum, it's not a maximum.
Right.
If we have,
Okay.
but if we approve the tandem garage scenario.
The parking
then
exception
that
goes
takes care
away.
of the parking. And then the driveway is just a driveway.
Correct.
But it's a driveway that'd be large enough to put 2 cars in it. And so, yeah, okay. So we're not really being asked to provide a front yard exception. Well, for one space.
For one
Under-
space,
Under
if,
the one,
under the-
under the original plan for one space.
exactly.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay,
The concern was just the car sticking out into the sidewalk.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So one more question, which was just, so in the scenario that was presented as sort of the third option, where the lower level would be used for parking and storage, how does the excavation required for that scenario compare to the excavation required for the other scenarios? It wasn't totally clear to me if they would be still excavating but not going down as far, or...
Good question.
That's a good question. Yeah, and I think they actually would be doing a similar scope of excavation. The one difference would be that they're not finishing it out, so it would not be conditioned space. It would simply be just an unfinished storage area. And typically, in a scenario like that, we would require a deed restriction that would prohibit a lower level conversion.
Yeah.
And that would have to be filed with the building permit application. We would craft that restriction for the applicant to file with the county recorder.
If I will, and I think this will be a question I'll have for the applicant when their time comes up, but I didn't see any distinction or difference between the tandem parking option that had the gym versus the tandem parking that had the storage.
I
It seemed like
agree.
they were just basically labeled differently.
Yeah,
I
that's
agree.
what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah,
That's the way I read it, too.
yeah, so maybe the applicant can clarify that when they come up. Are there any other questions of staff about the project?
I think I want to go back to the very beginning again on that 5.37. Okay, I want to understand a little bit better. Okay, can you pull up a couple of the elevations on the plans? We'll have to, right there,
So
maybe
do-
we'll have to enlarge that a bit. Okay, that's good. So we can see the dimensions they have there now. Scroll, and yeah, that's good. Okay.
Not too far.
So, over in the corner there, the difference between finished grade is 29 feet 4 inches, and the ground level, and the first floor level, 33.1, is, it is 4 feet 7 inches, 4 feet 7 inches. Going all the way around the house, they're either 4 feet 7 or 4 feet 9. I think one corner was 4 feet 11. And that would be, that's the ground level of the finished floor. And if you look under the existing profiles, the existing sections, it's the ground level of the finished floor elevation of the first floor is the same at 33.11 inches. Am I right? Do I have that right?
Right there.
33 feet 11 and 29.4. So it looked to me like that the finished floor elevation was going to stay the same. So how did it get up to be 5.3 feet? Is that because of the existing garage then? The finished floor elevation of above the garage then, it's sort of a split level house, right?
Right, right. So
And
the,
so it
You'll have a
actually goes
chance
up
to
there.
speak.
Yes.
And so when you include that existing garage space in the average, that raises the average then. I get it. I understand. Okay. Wow.
So if I pulled this up on my phone, so if I could go back to my question about the findings, I just want to make sure I understand what we need to find if we were to grant the request for the front yard parking exception. So one of the findings that has to be met in my reading of this is that the area proposed for parking in the front yard will not exceed 7 feet 6 inches in width and 20 feet in length. And the draft finding in our package was the proposed parking space will measure 17 feet wide by 23.1 in length. So those numbers seem to exceed the maximum,
Right.
that would support the finding that we have to make to grant a parking exception in my reading. And I just wanted to
Yeah, that's,
see if I'm reading that correctly.
yeah,
I had the same note.
Okay.
Yeah. no,
you are reading that correctly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so is that the appropriate finding to make?
Well, it's.
It looks like the area proposed for parking in the front yard will not exceed, but it will exceed. It shouldn't,
And it could be that the intent behind that was perhaps to
and I think what's meant is that,
allocate more
that's
towards.
a minimum dimension. Those are minimum dimensions for parking spaces, aren't they?
Well, the absolute minimum in the code is 7 feet 6 inches.
Yeah.
And that determination can only be made with a finding from the commission, and that's where it recognizes existing conditions. I mean, in general, the way we've applied the exception, is basically looking at what area can be accommodated, and if it meets the minimum, we've crafted findings, but
Right.
we've allowed
Right.
applicants to have.
Where we've run into trouble in the past has been if the
Right.
driveway's too narrow and you don't, and especially if you don't have that extra foot on the side. But yeah, something isn't quite right here.
Yeah.
I had the same comment when I was reading the staff report, yeah.
And this may be something that we add to the list of code changes that we intend to bring back to you, along with the
Yeah.
changes to the FAR
Yeah.
provision
Yeah.
and other,
So,
Okay.
yeah, we want to be able to find that the parking space, that there's enough space to meet our minimum requirements. And there is here.
I mean, I'm just going to throw this out there. Possibly, was there an intention in the code to sort of limit the amount of parking so that we don't have,
Right.
Yeah.
houses
Don't
set
cover
back
the
to
front
That
yard
was
with
the way I
parking.
had
yeah, I think
hear ya, yeah.
the way that this reads, by not exceeding those minimum dimensions, there would be more allocation to landscaping or
landscaping
other
and things,
treatments
yeah.
to the front elevation that wouldn't be allocated towards parking.
Yeah, but we've never done that.
I was going to, I would propose if this becomes an issue, that, I don't know if this now isn't necessarily the time for discussion, but, I think it could be merely something that's just sort of revised in the drawings in the sense that they don't need that full length. And
Right.
so if the applicants, changes their plans to basically get rid of whatever it is, a foot off of their driveway.
Right. And one other thing, if this were to be approved with the tandem scheme, the exception
Yeah.
goes away.
Way, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Is this kind of standard language that we've looked at many times? Why is it suddenly becoming a problem here on this report?
Yeah. Well,
is something different?
as we're updating the parking code, we're going to throw this in the fold, too.
Take a look at it, yeah.
Nobody's ever had the occasion to have so
Yeah.
much space.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions of staff about this project?
Couple small elements on the plan. So on the north side, go to the landscape plan. I think it's the best one to see this. Right, there's that little walkway or this gravel area. Is it concrete or gravel? I think it's concrete. On the north side of the house. And it abuts the driveway, which at that point is about 3 or 4 feet, 5 feet down. There should be a railing or something there, right? Or is that intended to be like a walkway?
I think one of their drawings, they show a railing at the top of that wall.
You're talking about
That spot, right?
this wall in the
Well,
front
that
or this
too.
on the
Actually,
side?
there's that one, that's the other question. The one that abuts the neighbor's walkway, there should be some sort of protection rail there so they don't
I
fall
see.
into the driveway. But also right there where there used to be a walkway that went on the north side of the residence, and I don't think that's possible anymore with that driveway.
Right, Chris actually just pointed out that this is a new retaining wall. Since
Yeah.
they're lowering the house in,
Oh,
they
so
need
that
to.
whole thing's low? Is that the,
The driveway. The driveway slopes down.
Adjacent to the driveway is the retaining wall.
The driveway drops down from
Right, so there's about 4-foot drop.
street level to 3 or 4 feet, yeah.
Right, so right there at the north of the house, you have this, the back of the walkway that just drops. Do we want steps there, or there's no access on the north side? I think there was at
Yeah.
one point, and it
Looks
looks like
like-
the way the walkway wraps around the building, there's some intentional design there that,
I think you're right. I think you would want to have stairs there for access, and also just for general safety issues. If someone was to access that side of the property, and that's a pretty significant drop-off, there could be
We're referring to like this part.
that's right.
could be
So
injury.
in the elevations, the applicant shows a railing there, a guardrail, and also a guardrail along here.
Does he?
Yeah.
Yeah, in the elevations.
It shows a partial guardrail.
Yeah, if you, if we were to pull up the
Maybe it just needs to be
elevations,
partial, because the drop's not that.
but this also introduces the, if you go to the front elevation. Yep, there you go.
Oh,
we have
I
the
see. So
railing here.
this is the
Oh,
railing.
yeah, there,
Okay, we have the
There's a
railing.
railing
in front.
there, yeah.
There it is, yeah, you're right, okay.
And my other thought too is just that if they were to add a stair, then that might pull us back to the issue of the elevation
The
change.
elevation, right, right.
Okay. Thanks, that clarifies it.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, with that, I will ask the applicant to come up and present your project. I know you had some comments that you wanted to express during our discussion, so if you want to respond to any of those things in terms of the elevations, how you calculated it, or anything in general, feel free to present it to us. Or at the very least, if you want, you can kind of express to us which of these is your preferred design and why.
Okay, thank you for coming.
Hi.
The owners here, so we have a discussion with the three options. Like basically they want to make a more living space, so if you can approve the scheme with the tenant parking, with some kind of a living space, that's like a home theater and a gym downstairs. The clear height for that scheme is 7'6". You can look at our section. And the next scheme for the storage, it's the clear height is 7 feet. So that's 6-inch difference.
Okay, so that's the difference between the gym versus the
And-
storage option.
yes.
Okay.
And how much different?
6
6
inches.
6 inch.
6 inches?
Yes, because the
6 inches less excavation?
yes.
Okay.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us or tell us about?
Originally, this house have a pop-up garage, so make the perimeter height is 5 feet, 5.37 feet. Now we lower down the garage to make the overall height of the house less than the maximum height of the code requirement. So I think this will reduce the massing of the house.
I guess I hope I'm not interrupting you. One question I have is, I think you show what looks like a light well or something at the south side yard.
that one, yeah. That one has a small light well there, yes. Yes.
Is that, and I guess my question is that just because the elevation changes slightly it goes up to the back of the building versus, I guess my question is, why do you have a light well there versus you don't have any at any other windows?
Oh, that one, because that gym, like sometimes in the fire issues, you might expect that the people climb out from the, there's something like a emergency escape window.
Okay.
Okay.
And I guess my one last question. So
So that's kind of responding to the building code requirements then for for a fire for that space to have an emergency egress then?
Yeah, egress window.
Okay, okay. I see what you're saying, yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions of the applicant? Project?
Well, I guess kind of applicant owner question on the, back to the landscape. The current plan doesn't have any of the plant list on it, but I'm assuming you're using the same plants you had on the previous list for the most part.
Yeah,
Right,
yes.
even though this doesn't show them. Okay, so given that. The driveway changed the circulation around the house, but you still kept a concrete swath on the north side of the house, which we just mentioned. It seems like just why? Why pave that area concrete when no one's going to be there, there's no use to go there? Waste of concrete when it could just be some plants. Your neighbors might enjoy that more than looking out on, bare
Yes, we could change to some kind of paver or plant there.
Yeah, why not plant it, right? So the other thing is that maybe just a side comment. Currently, when you look at aerial view, you have a really nice garden, like a vegetable garden in the back. It looks like a nicely used backyard. But now you're changing it to a utilitarian kind of hardscape. Is that to please us with a landscape plan? Is that really what you want?
The owner want to change to that for maintenance issue, but we could yeah, give some.
Yeah.
Would you mind, I'm sorry, would you mind coming to the mic?
Come to the mic.
Oh, existing, you have
It
concrete.
would be nice, to have a concrete, have a better drainage and also cleaner looking. Also, they have a lot of cars to park there, and, it's not practical to put a lot of plant there. It probably affects.
On the south side?
Yeah,
Oh,
on
yeah,
the
I
on the
understand
south
that. You
side.
need a concrete, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah,
although
it's
you could
it's
do
a
it
better
softer.
drainage.
I guess my question was the backyard. You currently have a vegetable garden there. It looks like it's a pretty nice scene. I mean, this is just a judgment. Why did you switch over to this kind of very hard
Oh,
urban
yeah,
plaza?
and because, the city, they want to have a, better design for the landscape part. That's why I
Well,
pay
that's
for
what I'm
the.
wondering. So you're redesigning what you like to something to please us, and I don't know if they're.
It's actually
I'm a
not
little worried, I'm a little
redesign, because the garden is being used by the, our neighbor, the old couple, actually,
the ones who garden it.
they are getting old, actually, I think, they would be happy, to not do the garden anymore there.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah,
so you're not
yeah,
just gardening.
because, we have,
Okay.
I did talk to both of the neighbor, and any other question for me, or? And actually, we made a major revision after last public hearing. And, Megan is the first time here, and I really appreciate you coming, tonight. And the major revision is on the, the basement, because, people keep giving feedback, too many bedroom. And we don't want, to make it too difficult for you guys. We want a quick solution. Because, the Emma, my daughter, would you stand up? Yeah, the 13 years old is, my little one. The old one is high school. And, she been, stay in the living room, near the door for almost 2 years. And we, really waiting for this, project being approved ASAP. So the major revision on the lower level, get rid of 2, bedroom, get rid of 2 bathrooms. This is a major revision, and we hope, we can have a quick solution. And you're talking about the drainage, and, we put, the more drainage, on the side. And not only that, and we got all the neighbors support, the project. And the study pool being put there, not doing the minimum. I put there for months and a half. All the neighbors pass by, they like it, and they they read the design, and we've been put a lot of thinking into it. I work with 4 landscape and 4 architect, 1 landscape architect, 1 interior design, and so we come up with something, the kid like, and also, she been doing more play day, sleepover with her friend, those days. And it's time to invite a friend to come over, so, and also family reunion. And as he mentioned, the excavation is really minimum between the, storage and the playroom. So we would like to keep the original if, we can pass. If not, the playroom will be the ideal. And we've been accommodating all the requests from the city and the committee. And I read the email and I really want to thank Anne and Christopher, I read the email, back and forth, we've been sending email for almost 100 times. And this guy working really hard to get everything done. And so we want a quick solution, really get this done, so in a timely manner. And, I address everybody's concern, and I hope, you can address my concern too. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, with that, I will open it up to the public. Is there anybody in the audience who'd like to talk? I see no one, so I will close the public comment period and bring it back to the commission for a full discussion.
Who's going to start?
Are you? I guess I'll start.
Go for it.
I'll start by saying I like the overall design, the aesthetics of the project. I think it's a nice improvement, and stylistically, I think the designer, architect, and the applicant have done a good job of kind of meeting our design guidelines in terms of the front porch, the materiality, and the detailing. And then, secondly, I would, secondly, I would just like to say that I guess the one thing that I noticed too is that the overall height of the latest rendition versus the originally approved plans is only a difference of, I think, 2 foot 6 inches taller than the originally approved design. And when I went to the site and looked at the story poles, I was surprised at how similar it was to the adjacent buildings on both sides of it in terms of its height. And so in that sense, I think I might be open to approve the project, but I would only be willing to approve the exclusion of the lower level FAR, I think, with the tandem parking. I think if we're going to allow them to build this big, I think basically of requiring them to meet the code requirements of the 2 covered parking spaces is a minimal requirement. And so with them meeting that, I would be, I think, open to approving the project. Are there any other comments?
Yeah. All right. So I've really been thinking hard about this one. So I really think you've been very responsive. I'm glad to see the tandem parking in there. That takes care of my initial concerns with the first design. I really still have problems with lowering the existing floor plate, and now it really is just amounting to the existing floor plate on the split level above the garage, by lowering that down to bring the theoretical lower level then under 5 feet and within our limitations. So I'm inclined to sort of strictly interpret that 5 foot line, and sort of say from the get-go that this building wouldn't be eligible for that lower level exemption from the start, because it has it exceeds, based on existing natural grade calculation of the floor plates under existing conditions, it exceeds 5 feet, only by this much, but it exceeds 5 feet. So what's the result of that? And so what we're looking at here then is a project that is going up. It's going to have a ground level or a semi-subterranean level that's 4 feet 9 to 4 feet 8, 4 feet 11 above grade. Under 5 feet, I grant you that, but it'll be close to that grade. And then on top of that, it'll have 2 more levels. And so we have the issue of FAR, and in a way, I have the issue of perceived FAR. What does it look like? I mean, the purpose of FAR, in a broader way, is to make sure that the homes we have built on our lots don't look too big. And so I went around and I looked at the examples that you'd given, the examples the staff had given, and what I saw was quite a variation. I thought that some of them that had been constructed in years past, maybe under different regulations or different interpretations of regulations.
I just want to add something here for the record. If you're referring to the property at 935 Madison, which had been referenced by the applicant
Yeah.
in different presentations, I looked at those records. That project was approved with a very explicit condition that that lower level not be conditioned whatsoever.
Okay.
And those property owners at the time had to file a deed restriction indicating that they would not convert the lower level space.
Okay, yeah, that's one there. Anyway, then the other one, another one I saw, there's a couple on 969 Ventura, met our rules because it's an upsloping site, and it clearly met our rules. But it looks huge because it has a huge garage door, and the perceived FAR to me is really very large. One across the street on where the slopes down, where the existing grade slopes down, the high part of the building is in the back, and you don't see it from the street. From the street, it looks very modest. But what we have here is taking an existing building with an on-grade garage, dropping that garage space down to the floor plate level of the existing building, and that modification still continues to bother me a lot. Because it's a construction-oriented device, an engineering device in a way to sort of get around the code requirements. And it bothers me, and I probably can't support the project for that reason, even though I tend to agree with Eric's comment that it didn't look that bad from the story poles. And I thought the one on Ventura looked worse. It looked more massive. But the one I saw in the 500 block of maybe Stanage or Evelyn,
Stanage.
one of those, it just looked too big. It was just huge on a narrow lot. And that was one of them that I think the applicant cited. I don't know who cited that, but I looked at it. And it had a similar situation where the garage dropped down, but you did have a really high semi-subterranean first floor. And it just ended up looking huge. So I think I can have reason from a design review standpoint saying, well, that's a harder one for me because this didn't look all that bad in the story poles. But the hard part for me is the fact that the existing natural grade and the existing floor plates, the way the house is designed, come out above 5 feet. I don't think it's eligible. So anyway, that I think I have to vote no, and I still will stick around with my voting no. And emotionally, I'd like to vote yes, because there's a lot. I like the way you worked on it so hard. I appreciate that a lot. I actually like the design. I'm happy with the tandem parking. I appreciate that you want as big a house as you can get. It's a really small lot, and you're working with a very difficult situation. But I still don't think I can support it.
If I made just a kind of additional comments to what I said, and somewhat in response to Doug, something that I would be open to, depending on how the other commissioners feel, is I would be open to including a deed restriction so that that lower level doesn't, just because I feel it is very ripe to be converted into bedrooms, to include a deed restriction so that those lower level occupiable or conditioned spaces aren't converted to bedrooms. And also another suggestion that I'm going to throw out to the commission too is, and kind of to the applicant, is just simply if they were to just lower the whole building by, say, an inch. So that then the average from the finished grade to the first floor can meet that 5-foot requirement. Or something, whatever it may need.
Maybe so. I'll have to think about that.
Well, Doug says one thing I think I see a little differently than you do, Doug, is you said you see them using the engineering solutions to work around the code. I see them using them to work within the code. And so I think what they're doing is within, maybe it wasn't the original intent, but I can't really say for sure that it wasn't the original intent to allow people to add more space by going down a little bit. And so I don't really have I think if, it's still a few feet below a maximum height of the building. Buildings next to it are fairly big. I don't really have a problem with it. I think the design of the house is nice. I have some issues with the landscape. I don't think much thought was put into it personally, but that's nothing to hold it back on. And I do have some more very precise things in the landscape I want to add on to it, but I'm willing to vote yes on it.
Just as a point of clarification, because there were a range of options presented, I think it would be helpful for me at least to understand if we're saying vote yes or vote no, which specific options we're talking about. So.
Good point, thank you. I was going to vote yes the same way Eric was on the tandem parking inside.
On the tandem parking, okay. So
I
sort
do
of
think
option
I do
B.
think they need to fulfill the parking requirements on that,
Okay.
But I guess,
I vote emphatic no on the number one, and no on the one with just storage, and probably no on the one with tandem parking.
so with respect to the tandem parking support, are you referring to the scheme where there's storage in a basement area or a gym and a theater?
And so I specifically was
The gym
referring to
and
the
theater.
gym.
The gym and theater.
It's fine, would be fine with me to have it be usable space too, if I were supporting the concept as a rule. I'd say yes, it can be usable space. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think my position's changed from the last meeting we had. I mean, I really appreciate the creativity in trying to work within an interpretation of the code, and I respect the family's need to grow and have a place to go, but I'm just concerned about this as a precedent of, you said an engineered solution from flat ground, and I guess I'm just concerned how it applies elsewhere. I do think FAR primarily is about bulk, but I also think I think the livable space is an important factor as we try to work on other buildings with neighbors, on all the various factors we deal with. So I just think if we make this this interpretation here, we're going to have to live with that.
And before you make any comments,
Sure.
I just wanted to say, just so you can have the full discussion to think about, is that, I guess I would really push that if we were to approve this, that we have a condition that they lower the whole, if you will, that somehow they lower that basement level, whether it be lowering the whole building or lowering the basement level and the first floor, finished floor plate, so that they can meet that 5-foot average of the whole thing and not have the 5.37. Because again, I think if we are going to set somewhat of
Well,
a
I think
precedent.
that, I actually think the way they've designed it, they would be under 5 feet.
Oh, okay.
The average going around would be under 5 feet, because it, I think, isn't that right?
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it would be.
so
The
what's the
only thing that knocks it above that right now, because it's like 4.11, 4.8 over most of the existing house, but then the garage, the floor level of the above the garage is 2 or 3 steps higher,
Oh, okay.
and it's common in that McGregor. I don't think maybe it's not a McGregor, but it's common in homes around
It's a
Albany.
McGregor.
It is a McGregor. It's common in McGregors.
Okay.
It's true. It's the situation of my McGregor in my house. So there's like 3 steps above where the garage is.
Okay.
And so So what they're doing is they're going to lower the floor elevation of the space that's now above the garage to the level of the rest of the house.
Okay.
And that'll bring the average perimeter height below 5 feet as measured when the project's built.
Okay.
But today, it's 5.37.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for clarifying that, Doug.
Yeah.
Well, I still will kind of take my position that I said earlier with the obvious exclusion for adjusting the heights.
Okay, so I share everyone's perspective that I appreciate you're trying to maximize your use of the site and accommodate a growing family, and I think we are all sympathetic to those concerns. I also I don't have any particular concerns about the overall about the design of the project or about going up. It seems like the above ground improvements are consistent with the neighborhood, and it's a nice design. So I think there is a version of this project that we would be able to approve that would help accommodate your family and your growing kids. I don't know that this is that project. I do have concerns as well about the precedent we would be setting about essentially sanctioning this loophole that allows a significant increase over the allowable FAR. And that's why I asked the question about other projects that have used the exemption. It sounds like there really aren't examples of other projects that have both used the exemption and that would have a true FAR that's as high as yours is. And if it was close, if it got us to an FAR of 5 or 6 even, if it was close around the margins, I think that exemption would be appropriate to apply to provide some flexibility. But when it seems like a wholesale end run around the FAR requirements, I have a problem with setting that precedent. So I definitely could not support the first option, and in part because I don't think we can make the findings that are required for the parking exception. But it doesn't sound like there's support for that, so we don't really need to get into it. I also just don't think I can support the tandem parking version with the livable space. Again, because I am just concerned about the actual FAR that we're approving and what this means for the future. And I would be potentially open to some version that allows use of that space for tandem parking and storage potentially, as long as it was also coupled with deed restrictions that made it clear it wasn't eligible to be converted to bedrooms or other livable space for the future. But I did have a question for, I don't know if this is really a question for staff or for the applicant, but it just procedurally, and again, thinking about all of these options that we have before us is, well, this is a question for the applicant. If you were given the choice essentially between being granted your third choice project or just being given a denial that you think you could appeal to the city council, if you have a preference in terms of the action that we take.
The other thing I would add, even though you don't have a scheme before you, and I know it's probably the least desirable outcome for the applicant, it could be modified so that there's no lower level. And it reverts, not perhaps in terms of style, but just in terms of concept back to that original design where it's simply a second story addition without any lower level excavation.
The 2008 plan?
Yeah, and in this case,
Modified.
not the actual 2008 plan itself,
Right.
but basically just taking the plans that have been filed with this application, getting rid of the lower level, and then just having the first floor and the second floor.
So,
Well, I don't know. It looks to me like we might have 3-2, and so I'd say go that way.
It sounds like, and if I may just to get clarification. So it sounds like if you had to, you would support the plan with tandem parking, but with the storage room with the 7-foot
Yes.
clear space.
Yes, I
Okay.
would. And so, but I am curious to hear, if there's and I'm not sure exactly where all the votes are, but if there was a choice between just a straight denial versus a project that you're not crazy about.
Yeah, if the applicant, if you'd like to come up and answer that question, and if I may, just kind of clarify the question to the applicant. And so the commissioner is asking if you had a preference, basically leaning, based on how the commission is leaning, would you prefer to have either, excuse me, the project with the tandem parking spaces below and the storage area with the 7-foot ceiling height, or if you would prefer to go back to a plan that doesn't have any basement level at all, similar to the original one, but aesthetically it'll look like what you've shown today as the new plans, or if you would just prefer to kind of start over and go from scratch.
The preference will be, the original one. But I mean, I find it difficult for, people to understand. Then that's why we converted, the bedroom to the home theater and the storage. And, honestly, I think, we have 2 parking in the front and 1 on-street parking and 1 garage. 4 car, we only have 2 adult and, we never have 4 car. 4 car, parking space is more than, enough. We don't really need additional parking in the back, and for the option 2. And, that one can be used better as a storage. But I mean, it make it easier for everybody if we make an additional garage, to extend the second garage. So we hope, we can pass it quickly. That's number 1. And the reference we're talking about, the excavation, and the one you have is 531 Stanage Street, which the design being passed a few years ago. And the excavation on the flat floor has no, slope, no mountain, no nothing, and very similar to what we have. And Doug keep mentioning, the house is too big, too huge, and regardless we have, the basement or not, doesn't really affect the appearance. Number 1. Number 2, as we talk about it, we have the study pool for so long, month and a half, we never have any issue. As a matter of fact, it's pretty, cohesive with all the neighborhood, and it does not taller. It's not taller than other people. It's not bigger than other people. It's not difficult to me at all. And I think you should support the things. And it's not big at all. It shouldn't be that difficult. And the Stanage one, the one we have, is a newer one, had the similar things. And I think talk about the coding things, as long as people, work with, the city code, apply to the commission and accommodate with all the hearing, is we should encourage people to do the legal way. Because living in Albany for so many years, I see so many people doing illegal addition, and they do without permit, regardless you like approve or not. And we should encourage people to go the right way and to do it, with permit or with city code. If you really don't like it, you should change the city code, Like that's what I'm thinking.
I mean, that's actually kind of a crucial point. If we don't like the idea of people excavating to add onto the FAR or get around the FAR, why don't we adjust that code so that it clears that up? Because right now we're just saying, well, it's not the letter of law. I find it kind of troublesome to.
No, that coupled with how we calculate stair area are coming back to you sooner than later.
So we're going to do that. So we'll
Yeah,
work on that.
we will be coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it should definitely be cleared up. In my view, it's to the extent we need to interpret it, I want to make sure we're trying to interpret it in a way that is it's fair and consistent with past practice, but also trying to at least understand what the likely intent was. And I just can't get my head around saying, it's okay to drop your house down, dig it out, and basically get yourself a whole extra story. That's where I'm coming out on it.
It's fairly common practice in a lot of communities. Albany doesn't do it very often because of the bungalows, it just doesn't fit.
Other thoughts here? I mean, sounds like we have some support on the commission, but I think within that, maybe majority support, we have a little bit of a difference. So,
Well, I think I want to hold my position, but it wouldn't bother me if I was in the losing end because there's a lot of good things about the project. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I also, as everybody else has said, just want to reiterate that I appreciate the applicant's willingness to, I think this is the third time we've seen them to go through these iterations and revise the plans and present us options as we've requested. I mean, I guess if I had to have the choice of either agreeing with our new commissioner in terms of the plan that she'd approved with the storage and the shortened ceiling height, I think I would be more willing to go that route than to not approve it, so that the applicant can have some type of usable space down there, even if it's for storage. Obviously, it's not their ideal use of that space.
One thing, just a little food for thought, if the commission goes in the direction of approving that scheme where the lower level is largely unfinished, I'm curious to know what the support would be to eliminate the shed with the water heater in the furnace and have the utilities relocated into the footprint of the house rather than building an expansion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And that could be something as easy as just simply framing out a wall in the basement.
But eliminating this shed
Yeah.
that's drawn there.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's quite that's a lot of digging and a concrete, looks like, is that probably concrete, huh? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Under the scenario 3 where it's storage only, so that is not habitable space, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, it would not be habitable space. It could not be conditioned, and we'd also ask that a deed restriction, a condition of approval be included, that there be a deed restriction prohibiting
On
future
the-
conversion.
If it were, yeah.
And is it?
The reason why that's my least favorite one of all of them is because then it'd be all of that work and all that digging, and you wouldn't gain anything. So,
Yeah.
I
guess for
don't think that's a very workable alternative.
The only advantage for the applicant is
In principle, I'm okay with the tandem parking down there and then livable space.
the only advantage for the applicant is it's
Pardon?
a faster process.
Pardon?
Yeah.
The only advantage for the applicant is it's a faster process, but it's going to cost them more money.
You get
right?
2 bedrooms.
What's
down. The applicant would then have 2 bedrooms, or a bedroom and a media room down there
Under option 3 or option 2?
on option 2.
When under option 2, they would have a home theater and a gym.
Home theater and a gym.
Yeah, I think what I heard pretty crystal clear from the commission is that option 1 is not really on the table for
No,
action.
option 1 has the 2 bathrooms.
Correct.
Yeah.
And the option with the storage, it wouldn't be habitable space down there because of the ceiling height? 'Cause I thought
It
a
would
7-foot
have legal
minimum.
ceiling height, but it wouldn't be conditioned in the way, for example, the home theater or the gym would be conditioned where, it basically becomes a family living room and it's, finished out, carpeted, insulated, heated, sheetrock, all that.
Yeah.
With this option, it's effectively just a lower level storage area.
And the only reason to do 3/2 for us would be because it wouldn't set a precedent, right? That would be,
Right.
Why?
Well, I think
It's not
still-
habitable space, right?
Well, it still would in the sense where we're allowing them to have any space down there.
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, if we allow any space within that basement level, we're setting a atypical precedent.
Right.
Yeah, and I think I'm not crazy about the lower level storage either. But in the spirit of trying to find a compromise, I feel like that's as far as I would be willing to support.
I think I'm in the same boat.
Yeah.
Well,
So-
I guess I'll just kind of spitball this out here. So it seems like, excuse me, the option with the tandem parking and the home theater and gym, I think, does not seem to have majority support.
It doesn't?
Well, we're basically, I think, myself and Commissioner Kent are in support of that. And then,
Val's not?
no.
Not for two, no.
No. And then the other option with tandem parking and a storage space with a 7-foot ceiling, clear space, I think would get support from, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your last name.
Jennings.
From Commissioner Jennings and from Commissioner Minotti. Push come to shove, I might be willing to support that. But those seem to be our two sort of leading options, with two commissioners willing to support either option. We can either put this to a vote and just see what happens, or if anybody has any
You could make a
convincing-
motion and just see if you get a second, and
Sorry, Eric, I guess the other option that we mentioned not on the table is they go back and design it so it doesn't have the space down there,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
may be more cost effective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess my only, which you're totally right, Val. I guess my only concern is that then we're going to be, I guess the one thing I like about these two options is that this is one of the few times where we aren't needing to provide an exception for the parking. And so that if we don't approve that, then it's going to have to come back to, are we going to approve them to park in their front yard setback? And then will this exacerbate the sort of already parking issue that Albany has? And so that's why I like the tandem parking in the sense that it provides parking as the code dictates, which is why I'd be more, I guess, willing to go towards supporting the storage area, since it provides parking as code dictates, and then gives them, I guess, sort of like you said, a compromise of additional storage space, but doesn't necessarily give them a habitable, occupiable space in the basement.
Yeah, I guess if we had the condition that it was gym or family room, not bedrooms, and not bathrooms, so we're not adding capacity really to the house. So if you took that out, the house, number of people that could live in the house is the same, whether or not you have that basement. But with the basement, the house becomes much more usable, much more enjoyable to live in, more functional. So we're really taking out function for this. I think, and I don't know why we don't allow people to take advantage of that. If we can control it so they don't add extra bedrooms. I understand the 5-bedroom thing, that's too much for a small lot. But making the house this more usable, more effective, I'm not following that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, no, I somewhat agree with you, Commissioner Kent, and yeah, no, I wish there was some way that we could put some kind of condition so that this wasn't necessarily became a precedent, and that we could just basically say, for this one case, we are
Well, that's why
allowing this.
I'm not so worried if it is a precedent. So what's wrong with this? If people add family rooms underneath their house, and they're not going over they're not bigger than they normally are, they're not higher than they normally are, there's not more people living there, they just all of a sudden have a very effective library, craft room, family room. I mean, that's what we're all missing.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this, my own anecdotal experience is that I was looking at a lot with a distressed property in Albany, and trying to work out how if I were to buy it, how I could, and the house needs to be torn down, how I could build and get the most out of the space.
is it 721 Talbot?
No, it's on Brighton.
1126 Brighton?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And, I mean, and then when I was drawing the plans, the only way I could really, I mean, it's a 25-foot wide lot by 100 feet deep, and the only way I could really get 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms in the house was by excavating and having a full lower basement level. That would have to use this notion of the FAR. It does have slightly different than this site. It's not completely flat. It has a somewhat of a slope that could be used. But yeah, I mean, going off of your comments, Chris, that yeah, I do see how, because of these tight lots, how using this notion of the FAR and excavating can be the only way that a lot of people are able to develop these houses on our tight lots that we have in Albany. I don't know. That's why I personally, I would prefer to support the tandem option with the gym, and then with a deed restriction, as Commissioner Kent said, to ensure that there weren't any occupiable bedrooms down there. But I don't know if I can convince another commissioner.
Yeah, and I'm sympathetic to your point about having more livable space. I guess in my mind, we're just coming at it from maybe not the best angle, and the right way to approach that is, it's an interesting concept, but we should be talking about, well, should we be increasing FAR for everybody in Albany rather than, again, I think sanctioning sort of exploitation of a loophole. And I give you full credit for finding and wanting to, utilize that. But I think it's a lot of house to squeeze into that lot based on our current standards. And it doesn't seem consistent with what the city is trying to achieve in having the FAR as low as it is. So maybe there's a broader policy discussion to be had about, what those standards should be, but it's not crazy about it.
The house will look the same whether with any of these 3 options.
Right.
It'll look the same way. There's my issue is sort of one of kind of principle here. Otherwise, as I said at the beginning, a very hard one for me, because there's a lot to like about the project, and I'm really appreciative that they're able to modify the design to provide the parking off-street. So that was my initial concern, and if you're going to dig down, then you don't get a free ride, and then you better put that parking. You better meet your parking requirement there, and they've done that with this design. So it's a tough one. I really don't want to waver on kind of holding firm with my position about the measurement of the starting height plates, but I don't want that discussion really to have to go to the city council if it's going to go on appeal, because I don't know where that would go. And
Yeah, and an appeal is usually the least desirable outcome, because
it's a very undesirable
yeah, the city council
outcome,
really puts a lot of trust into
Yeah,
the planning commission, and they really don't like to get into land use issues, particularly on a site-specific.
So I'm trying to hold the line here on the interpretation of that one item, but I think we can correct that in the future too.
Right. And we will correct that.
We will correct that.
We're going to correct that to make it clear that it's based on existing grade. We're also
If we really have confidence we're going to do that, then
change the stairs provision.
then maybe I can be assured, and maybe I can be safe to let this one slip through, as it were. But that's my reluctance. There's a lot to like about the project.
Yeah, so I think, it's, given that we've been at this for close to an hour now, I'm hearing that there's support for the scheme with the lower level storage with some conditions of approval. Does somebody want to make a motion?
Can I add one more thing?
Go ahead.
I had a question for the applicant, but go ahead.
Well, David's note was really good, because it actually clarified what was in my mind. He wrote it, and he did go back to the original intent of when and he said it wasn't really about limiting people, the option for people to dig down below. It was really just trying to allow good daylight and
Yeah.
and keep the FAR.
Yeah.
So I've made the mistake too a couple times this evening, stating that we're trying to get around the original intent. We aren't. The original intent wasn't to not let people excavate.
Correct,
down.
that's right. No, it's not at all, not at all. The original intent was to help, regulate the FAR, I think, goes to looking at the perceived bulk. And I think here, a project like this that has a semi-subterranean first level may have a .55 FAR, but it'll look like it's 0.6 or 0.7. And then when it really is 0.77, and that's what can happen. And so, but it's fine to exempt space that isn't visible from the street because it's not a part of the above-ground bulk. I have no problem with that. That's, yeah, and I think that was the intention, anyway, I think that's the intention of this section of the code. Yeah.
I just wanted to
And
ask.
it's okay to go down. I think it's great to go down.
If the alternative was scope 3, which is the alternative storage plan, which has the parking on it, would you prefer that and to move the project forward versus coming back with an alternative design that didn't, you're going to have to lift the house up. It seems like that's going to be very expensive, but you'd prefer that than coming back with a design that didn't have all
No, they
that?
won't have to lift the house.
No?
The only thing that
Or they have to excavate?
The existing first floor elevation is what, 29.2, whatever it is, and the proposed first floor elevation is the same as that same thing. So they're not, the way I read the plans is they're not talking about lifting the house. They're talking about lowering the garage and digging under the rest of the house
Excavating.
to make a bigger space.
Yeah, excavating, which seems to me that gets to be very expensive.
It
And
will
so
be.
what
It
what
is.
I'd like to
It
just
is.
know from your perspective, would you prefer the scope 3 proposal versus coming back with something that might be more cost-effective that doesn't include that lower level space? You would prefer scope 3 is what I'm trying to
Yes,
understand.
that's right. And, this is a major decision for the family because, addition like this going to cost easily $500,000. So big investment, we take it seriously. And we do, and the whole process is, is a long, stressful, and very painful. I don't want this, painful procedure continue with you guys. So let's get it done, and the story is fine. It's not what I like, but I mean, if it can be passed, that's great.
Okay.
So unless somebody else has another proposal, I would, if you're willing, propose that we move forward or test scope 3 and see if we have the votes for that. But I'm open to somebody else putting something forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, the last comment I'll say before a motion is offered is that unlike most of our projects that come before us, and maybe I'm forgetting the past history, but we haven't had much, if any, of complaints from the neighbors in terms of access to light and views.
No.
And so I find that as a sort of added benefit to this
There's a lot of
project.
good things. And it's slightly under the height limit as well.
But with that being said, yeah, I mean, I'm open to a motion if you'd like.
Then I would, well, you have to correct me if I get this wrong, but I would, for PA 16070, design review and parking exception for second story addition at 937 Polk, I would propose what's called scope number 3. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, scope 3, and that also takes the parking exception out of the picture. So it's just design review pursuant to scope 3.
And just to be clear, scope 3 is the tandem parking with the
Lower level,
storage
unfinished storage.
and a 7-foot clear ceiling height.
And then we had talked about having deed restriction.
Deed restriction, and also if given that it would be unfinished, instead of having that utility closet off the back, relocating the utilities within the footprint
So
of the home.
relocate the utilities within the ground floor area.
Could we relocate the shop to above grade?
Please come to the mic.
That utility shaft, can we move up to above grade, like still attached to the house?
Well, I think the point is that will affect the FAR.
Right.
Because then it would have to be included in the FAR if it's up on the first or second floor.
But it's only 5 feet in high, just
Yes, but
close the.
I still think it would put the FAR over the limits. Am I
It
correct?
would, and it's, quite frankly, it's very unusual for us to see a separate extension of the building footprint solely encompass utilities. Typically, people do a tankless water heater that's mounted, or they find a footprint within the house to provide the utility services.
And I think and just to be clear, so that you and the applicant understand, what we're proposing is basically to approve the version with the storage, but then basically relocating that bump out for the utilities, and basically just having that somewhere in that basement level floor plan.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So were there any other details or amendments to that?
I had a couple on the landscape, they're very minor, but there's a little bit of a landscape that sticks into the driveway. Let's just take that out. The cars are just going to run over it. I don't understand why it's there. And then on the south, and eliminate maybe gravel instead of concrete on both sides of the house. I don't understand why all the concrete, if it's not being even, not being used as a path or anything. So, no, not that plan, the other, so see the little bit of landscape that sticks out right next to the car?
Oh,
Yeah, that's just going to get run over. I don't know why it's there. It seems a maintenance problem. And then on the south side, we have the strip of concrete, but we have that little light well there. And isn't that an exit route? Isn't there some way, how do you get around the building? So,
I don't think that's technically required by code to have that there.
to get around or have the light well?
Yeah, I don't think it's required to have that light well for that window. But I do know because of the elevation change, I think because the elevation becomes slightly higher here, that might possibly be needed just to make sure that the grade doesn't come right up to
It's only a few inches, it's not a deep
Yeah,
well, but
yeah, maybe 6
if it's
inches.
going to be a walkway, that has to be accommodated somehow.
Could just have a grade
And I
over
think they
it.
should have a walkway, because how are you going to get a wheelbarrow or gravel or mulch back there? You don't want to go through the house, right? So, I mean, just a basic functional.
What about just some kind of practical like grate or something like that over the well?
Oh, I think it's concrete. If that area's concrete and the well's concrete, they can just slope the sides.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
You don't have access from the north side?
Well, you don't, because it drops down 4 feet at the driveway there.
Basically, if I will, to clarify your comment / amendment, is that they modify that south side side yard path so that it's either sloped so that the light well doesn't create a change in elevation
Right,
as it
so
does.
it's a walkable path. I
Yeah,
guess.
okay.
Or either north or south, but have a walkable exit to the backyard.
Okay,
I'll accept those.
all right. So there's been a motion. Is there a second?
I will second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second.
So we can have discussion. So the motion is for storage downstairs.
Yep. Scope 3, tandem parking with storage, deed restriction, relocate the utilities, and the landscaping changes.
Right.
Yep.
And I also have, instead of concrete, use gravel. That,
I'm open to that.
I just want to
On
say,
those.
before you vote, that I think that's the worst of the three options. I feel strongly about it. So if you're going to do all that excavation, I think they should have livable space down there. Yeah.
Would you be willing to go for
might
2?
I might even be persuaded to change my vote altogether in order so that they can have livable space down there And as long as we can change that code section, I'm sticking on principle because of the problem I have with the code section, not because of the problem I have with the design.
And,
Well, I think I'm in the same boat, but to me, it's not habitable space, so I think that changes how the space is interpreted.
Oh, yeah, well, I guess,
We don't
you know,
take,
as what David Arkin said in his letter, he grew up in basements, so did I. And so, yeah, I've lived in basement space a lot. I've slept in basement bedrooms for a part of my life and that sort of thing. So I think that underground space can be very usable and can contribute a lot to the family. And we don't have it around here, but in the Midwest, it's sure, it's everybody uses it. Yeah.
and when you refer to clarifying the code provisions, I'm assuming you're referring specifically to the language in the code that refers to the exemption of the lower levels based on the height.
And more, what we need to clarify is the techniques for calculating that, for calculating that. I think, and how that's measured,
Well,
and what we do with that. We should have a further discussion about that, I think. Yeah.
well, I mean, I too would prefer them to have usable space down there, and so if you're willing to reluctantly go along with the tandem parking and the usable space in the basement, the gym, I'd be willing to support that too, and I think we could get votes for that.
Yep.
If you have a preference for that over the
Yeah, I
version with the
do.
storage.
I think not being able to use that, to have to build that space and not being able to use it would be a very bad result.
so there's a process to do a counter motion, isn't there?
Pardon?
There's a process to do a counter motion before we vote on
Yeah,
the
so
main motion?
we had a motion and a second
Yes.
Yep.
on
Yeah.
that. But
So,
if we're
okay.
looking at revising that, we can let that motion die on the vine. And if you're changing your course on this, you can make a new
Okay.
motion.
Or you can do a
guess I can make-
substitute motion on top of the main motion, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So why don't you do a substitute
I don't want to be
motion?
the one to make a motion, but I guess I will.
I
guess
can
I'll
make the
have to.
motion, I just,
So I'll make an alternate, it would be, what would it be, an alternate
Substitute
motion?
motion, isn't it?
Or a new motion?
a
I think it's a
substitute?
substitute motion.
Yeah, it would be an alternate motion to approve
And we vote on that first.
the,
Vote on what first?
We would vote on the new
The
motion
alternate motion first?
first, I believe.
All right, so then I'll move planning application 16070, design review and parking exception for 937 Polk. And I'd go with, for option 2, which has the tandem parking and the gym and media room downstairs, and with Chris's suggestions to add it.
We'll minimize
landscape
concrete and have a route to get to the backyard where you don't need to go through the house.
Yep, okay.
And would you be open to a friendly amendment of a deed restriction?
On what?
A deed restriction for the basement level to the,
To
ensure
restrict
that
it to
it's,
those uses
Yeah.
then, or?
yes, so they couldn't be used as
Prohibit
bedrooms.
bedrooms.
Okay, to prohibit bedrooms and bathrooms anyway, yeah.
And then on the issue of the utilities, do we want to,
I mean, I'm open to moving it into the interior. If it's just going to be a gym space, I see no problem with just basically, more or less, they just have to build a closet, 2x4s, frame out a closet to
Yeah.
enclose the utilities.
so a utility closet within the existing footprint of the home?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. So,
Second?
there's been a motion, an alternative motion, and a second.
okay.
Any more discussion on this motion? If not, I will pull it to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
So I'll vote aye on this one.
Aye. All against?
No.
Okay, so we have 2 in favor and 3 against. And do we need,
No,
So,
no.
3 in
Did Chris-
favor.
How did Chris vote?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What'd you vote?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought that's what I said. I'm sorry, 3 in favor and 2 against.
Okay.
And do we even need to vote on the other motion?
No, I don't think
No,
so.
Okay.
you now have an approving motion.
Don't have enough, yeah.
So your project has been approved with those specific conditions that we discussed.
Scope 2 was approved.
Yes, yes. Scope 2 with the tandem parking, the home theater and gym. There is a condition of a deed restriction so that you can't convert them into bedrooms on the basement level, and a condition, one for the landscaping, to have a walkable path, most likely on the south setback, side yard setback, to have a walkable path to the rear yard, and to relocate the utility closet or shed that's on the basement level to within the footprint of the basement.
It might well fit in the garage.
Yeah, it might possibly fit in the corner of the garage.
Yeah.
And depending on the type of appliance you pick, you might be able to reduce the footprint of it. So with those conditions, your project has been approved, and I appreciate your work with us to get to this point. So there is a 14-day appeal period, so please do not make any permanent moves or remove your story poles until after that 14-day appeal period is over. Otherwise, your project has been approved. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I think a big thing would be
That's a
for
hard
us to, as soon as possible, try to address those cold.
Yes. Yeah, I want to get those to you in June, seeing as how this issue of FAR interpretation as well as calculations have come up in the last two meetings and have proved to be challenging.
Okay.
Okay, with that, our action items are over. Next is new business, the residential design guidelines.
So we worked in September and November of last year on the residential design guidelines. It got put on the back burner while we were working on the parking regulations, and so now we're bringing it back to you. Quite a bit revamped from when you last looked at it. We took your comments from the November meeting and worked them into and kind of fundamentally reorganized the structure of the residential design guidelines. So for your review tonight, we're really just getting a temperature check as to whether or not you like the new structure and if you think the supporting criteria is communicating expectations about design to both applicants and property owners in Albany. Just a little bit of background, the design guidelines were adopted by the city in 1997. They were substantially updated and adopted again until July of 2009. In general, the guidelines are used to assist applicants, neighbors, staff, and planning and zoning commissioners to understand the city's design goals. And with that, we include explanations and examples of high-quality design solutions. We have within our general plan a policy recognizing the design guidelines and their role as a guiding policy within the city to mitigate impacts on neighboring properties, and to really promote high-quality architectural design within the community. The action item within the general plan is to amend and expand the design guidelines. In this case, it's to encompass some of the historical architectural features within the community, but also to really bring the guidelines up to speed. Things were different in 2009 than they are now. Our codes have changed immensely. We now have a Cal Green Code, which addresses green building, which we didn't have at the time. And as this commission can attest, we've had a bit of a tug of war when it comes to introducing contemporary architecture into our more traditional neighborhoods of bungalows, and we don't have anything within the guidelines that recognizes that. So with your review in November, you provided feedback to the staff, and kind of the big picture issue that Susan Friedland, Commissioner Friedland, had identified was really establishing a set of guiding principles. Previously, we had carried over a lot of the language from the 2009 guidelines, and some principles were identified and other design-specific criteria were identified as part of 10 bullet points, and it didn't, in her opinion, it wasn't very cohesive, and in looking at it again, I realized that, in fact, we do need to kind of look at it high level and then go down with examples. So we've revamped it to include 7 principles, and within those principles, we've identified specific criteria. We've also changed the language consistent with what the commission indicated about providing succinct language. These are guidelines, so there are not supposed to be shalls. These are shoulds because this document is advisory in nature. One other thing that was identified was incorporating universal design as part of the guidelines, and there was additional miscellaneous language inclusion throughout the document. And so right now, we have condensed the 7 principles into the following. The first is landscaping. And within landscaping, we carried forward the commission statement, the front yard and front facade design are the home's contribution to the community, and landscaping is an important aesthetic element of the home design, as well as noting the pedestrian emphasis within that landscape bullet. For architectural design, this is where we have included language regarding front porches and covered entries being encouraged, architectural relief as an important aesthetic element, trim and details which give a house warmth and character, paint color, building materials, and window details, which are not so much the paint color, but certainly the building materials and window details are things that, content that the commission looks at when evaluating a project. With respect to parking, we've identified garages and parking as important considerations on Albany's small lot, and given the discussion we had, I don't need to beat that any further. We've also included electric vehicle charging stations, garage doors, and driveway materials. Under Principle 4, livability, we've identified modernizing interior space for better function and long-term occupancy, interior ceiling heights, universal design, and then different expansion types that we've seen within the city of Albany. For context, this is where we've put privacy considerations and compatibility with adjacent homes. Number 6 is accessory dwelling units. And lastly, Principle 7, outdoor space, where we've had issues come up with decks and privacy, roof decks in particular, as well as balconies, and then also just promoting indoor-outdoor flow. So we've included those principles with those supporting bullet points for applicants to look at. And I think for our discussion this evening, we're really soliciting your feedback to see if that's a step in the right direction. Just as before, we have kept the architectural character from 1910 to 1950 to identify some of the more historic architectural types within the community. We've also have the chapter on contemporary architecture, and we've expanded some bullet points within that chapter. This was an example photo that we left in the PowerPoint for you tonight, just to show a good example. And this is also included in the design guidelines of a home that utilized contemporary materials but fits within an existing neighborhood. Our befores and afters, another before and after. Again, this is exempt pursuant to CEQA. And with that, we're really asking you to take a fresh look at this, tell us if we're going in the right direction, and then we would anticipate coming back to you for formal action in July.
I started looking at the landscape, and I ended up rewriting the whole thing.
That's great.
So I made copies, but then I left the copies, but I have one here in front of me. It just says a lot of things. The landscape was all about aesthetics, and there's so much function that the landscape provides, and I wanted to address that. And Val actually sent me an email about a couple of things I added. So in general, I'll try to be brief here, but my landscape focuses, because you go from landscape to front yard, it's almost like, what are we talking about, the front yard? We're talking about the whole landscape. And I really zoomed in on the front yard, because it's really the public space. And
Chris, what kind of pages, where is that section?
it's like
It's
7
page
or
10
8?
of the draft
Page
document.
10? Okay, thank you.
10, yeah, there it is.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start. So the first line, I changed it to read, the front yard landscapes are the home's contribution to the community, play an important aesthetic and functional role in home design. Okay, so we know it's function too. Most of the rest of it just made some fine tweaks I'm not going to talk about, but then I added on to this was landscaping. Well, I took the aesthetics out. Landscape should provide aesthetic enhancement to the residents. Shrubs and ground covers should be spaced to create massings rather than individual plants. I've noticed every plan that comes in here, they have a dot and a dot and a dot. And they have a 12-inch plant, and 36 inches later, they have another 12-inch plant. And that just looks, no one plants that way, it just looks horrible. So they really should be designed in masses, right? Touch, the canopies touch of each, even small plants. So this is shoulds, this is not has to be, but it looks much better. So plants should be done in massings rather than individual plants. Canopies should touch each other at maturity. The next bullet item, landscaping should be used to help provide visual buffer or privacy screening to adjacent properties. While landscaping, I want to make sure that it said, while landscaping can assist, it should not be relied on to mask, screen, or hide problematic architectural design. So I don't want to say, okay, it's really ugly, we put a tree there. No, tree might help, but let's fix the underlying problem.
I've said that before.
Yeah. Well, we've all said it, and I always come to the rescue and fix, all these horrible walls, right? But Val had this idea, reduce home energy costs and improve comfort by absorbing solar thermal load from sun during hot summer, so we can use landscaping for that use. Consider plants that are a source of food for native wildlife. I mean, we're trying to make the place prettier and more lively. Another bullet item, last 4 more here. Plants as a whole play a significant role in cleaning urban air by collecting dust and pollutants. Therefore, it is important for each home to contribute by adding living plants where feasible, most importantly in the semi-public areas of the front yard. And this is my way of addressing synthetic lawns. And I don't, if one person does it, okay, but if everybody does it, Albany's going to just, all the good things that the green stuff does is just going to be, the dust is going to float everywhere, it's going to be hotter, and so cumulatively, it's a bad idea. Occasionally here, they're not a bad idea. So I thought we should encourage people to plant real plants in their front yard. Landscaping should follow bay-friendly landscape guidelines, yes. And then the last one, consider long-term maintenance needs for each plant. Vines, such as vines, shrubs in front of windows, proximity of trees to structures, etc.
Right.
Just a little bigger. Okay.
And you have those written down, you said
I have them written down.
Okay.
I'll send them.
Yeah,
to you.
that'd be
And
great.
other than that, that's where I put my focus.
Yeah.
If I may just kind of piggyback off of what Chris said, I'm just kind of globally thinking about this and the 7 principles. And I guess just in that, like the, page 3, that the first dot where it says the front yard and front facade design are the homes, and I think I was the one who came up with that sentence, that maybe we should change that to get rid of the reference to the front facade design, and just purely make it about the front yard and landscaping. And any of that notion about the front facade design being the public image, put that under the architectural design.
So, okay, so we would modify that really just to address landscaping more broadly.
Yeah.
And then the
that's right.
emphasis on the
I
front
thought
yard
the same
could be
thing.
relocated to architectural design.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then
that's
maybe
great.
that'll help, I think, as Susan said last time we talked about this, trying to making those the quick snippet of the principles more consistent. Whereas like parking says, garages and parking are important considerations on Albany's small lots, or architectural design is front porches and covered entries are strongly encouraged. So then we could maybe tweak that landscaping to be kind of consistent with that
Yep.
type of phrasing.
Can I ask, what's the best way to proceed here and sort of review? What's the most expeditious for staff? And should we go person by person, or should we go section by section and just chime in, or?
And also just a
Whatever.
broader process question. If we have like little tiny nitpicky things,
Yeah,
is this
yeah.
the
Yeah.
forum to bring them up, or can we like email you?
Yeah, you can definitely email comments, and Val had actually
Yes.
emailed us some
Yeah, Val
constructive
had a-
comments as
Yeah,
well.
Val had
So
something
we
on
may-
the
so
So I
desk here.
think
That's
for
good.
our discussion right now, keeping it kind of high level, going through each principle, and if you have minor corrections, definitely email that to us, and we will incorporate those changes.
Yeah, and just for random notes too, we also, I think we've been kind of trying to encourage that for stuff like our meeting minutes and stuff. If you have just for more grammatical changes, then expedite the process, just send it to staff. I guess I would say, I don't know, maybe just go by principle or section.
So does anyone else have comments on landscaping?
No.
I do like the before and after photos, I think.
Oh, I have one more question on the, you say that the subject sites which do not have trees are required to plant trees as condition of approval, see urban forest.
Street trees.
Street trees, right. Now, I put a note here, I'm not sure if this is right or not, but if there is not an opportunity for street trees on that project, is there a tree bank that they can give money to, or
I don't believe that we have that in place. As I understand it, if a property goes through this process, they are subject to that condition of approval, and for whatever reason, the tree can't be planted, they don't pay for the application fee, or they don't pay into a fund that would otherwise fund street trees.
because planting street trees on some of the hill areas where everybody's protecting their views is can be
Counter.
an issue, yeah. Okay.
Can I make just a general comment that it's more of a question how you or we are going to use this, which is, I was kind of reflecting on when we get a staff report on a particular project, at the end, you always go through the design guidelines and kind of talk about how this project relates to the design guidelines. And the phrasing that you have now under the proposed one, is that going to be, you're going to be able to use that in the same fashion? Because currently, for example, it just says landscaping.
Right.
As opposed
Yeah.
to a kind of a value statement or whatever from before. And
Right. I think, in keeping it a little more broadly defined with these principles, we have a little more flexibility, because certainly a project may not conform to all of the criteria that's in there, but I think in evaluating it, we have the flexibility to say, okay, this project incorporates landscaping and street trees, and we can give some analysis to you and how we see it complying with the criteria that's specified, perhaps not all of it, but some degree of it.
Well, I think I added this definition right in the front. Front yard landscapes generally consist of plantings, fences, landscape walls, steps, and walkways. And together, they create the first impression. So I think, landscape, how do we define that? It's just what you said.
yeah, and let me just go back on our staff report from tonight on 6-1, that, you go through and you say the front yard is the house's contribution to the street, and then you kind of provide the next one was every house needs a usable front porch,
Yeah.
and so if we're just going to say landscaping, it's just unclear to me how, I like the simplicity of it, but just think through how you're actually going to use it when you have to do a staff report.
Right.
Because it's not clear to me.
Yeah, what is the goal that we're
Yeah.
working toward?
I think that's a really good comment, and probably what you guys ought to sit down and do is sort of
Take
kind
the
of
next design
take-
review
Take a
application
look at some
and.
staff reports and
Yeah.
and kind of do a draft of that, and then maybe that would lead to, because that's the way these guidelines get used the most.
Yeah,
is
it's
when-
helpful in the staff
when you
reports. I always reflect
Take
on
the
those.
design guidelines and do a staff report, and then it comes to us with those categories. I think that's really a wise comment, and tie them, let's work on tying them together kind of in advance. I think that's good.
Otherwise, I like the principles. But
Is it, when I look at it, and I look at, like, for instance, the landscaping, and I look at, on page 10, I look at the stuff you've written, for me, it seems like you're just you're providing them sort of direction for the applicants to go in terms of, if you have a high FAR, you got to provide a landscape plan. We want you to actually think about the landscaping rather than just negate it. And you do have some specifics in terms of, should include the plant species, the landscape design should demonstrate a relationship with the home. And so I feel like you're giving them some direction. I guess it's just a matter of maybe how specific of a direction we want to give them.
That's great.
Well, I guess maybe this goes a little bit to Val's point, and maybe the last project was a good example. We sort of have piecemealed requirements based on our current design guidelines, but there's not specificity on landscaping, and so we had to talk through a lot of the specifics about the preference to
Right.
define paths, use gravel, use less concrete. And I think these are things that when we are evaluating plans, now that we have some more prescriptive criteria, we can go in our analysis and say, this is where the project is consistent with these with the principle.
Well, you do cite bay-friendly landscapes, so a lot of that stuff's in there, right? So you don't, that's full of all that, using natural surfaces rather than concrete. And
Although, as we've seen, we don't always have applicants who go down the path of doing bay-friendly
Right, so how, should we
installation.
take some of the key points of Bay-friendly and put it in here to, but then you're kind of repeating codes and stuff.
Maybe I'm missing it, but I don't see the reference to like Bay Area friendly planting.
It's, right over here.
Oh, Bay, huh? Right in front of me.
Yeah.
Bay friendly planting.
Friendly language.
I guess,
So,
well, actually, I have a question for Chris. As a practitioner in the landscape architecture field, are there principles within bay-friendly that you would really emphasize just for sustainability purposes and, you know, aesthetics?
Yeah, there's a lot of good things. I mean, all of them are pretty good. But, you know, a lot of the bay-friendly principles rely on maintenance. It's not, it's maybe a quarter of
it's more
about
maintenance-driven
planting, the rest
rather
of
than
it's about how do you
aesthetics.
maintain it? What do you do with things? So that might not be so applicable.
that's not really
but-
relevant here.
Yeah, right.
What about like, is drought tolerant? Is that sort of a
Yeah.
subsect of it?
That's
or-
Drought tolerant, climate adapted, using cardboard mulch because it really gets rid of the weeds, you know, as opposed to using that plastic
Oh,
stuff they used to put down
That's
before.
sheet mulching, right?
Yeah, sheet mulching, right. Used to put down, staple down that big plastic grid everywhere. Disastrous. It has all those points in it.
Okay.
What's,
I mean, yeah.
Oh, yeah, one last thing. So we call it landscaping, and maybe it should be landscape design, because you have architectural design.
Yeah, I agree.
But then we have parking after that, so we don't call it.
Parking design. Well, we could.
It's okay. It's okay.
Sorry, it's not a pure thing, but.
But, and I'll just, in the complete spirit of disclosure, we're winding down on a pretty major renovation of our backyard. Do we call it landscaping, hardscaping?
You want what?
Landscaping and hardscaping?
Hardscaping, yeah, all right, yeah. I consider hardscape part of landscape, but. I would
Is
too.
hardscape encompassed within the term landscape
Yeah,
design?
because
Is it?
landscape
Or-
design to me is, you
Yeah.
know, that's everything outside the building. You know,
Okay.
Fences, furniture, I mean, utility placements, you know.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of
Yep.
just the
Yeah.
term landscape design.
I like it.
I mean, I don't have any specific
So-
requirements beyond what we've said for landscaping.
My general comment, so, let's see. So I had a lot of little small things and not many big things.
Oh, yeah, if you have
And,
those written?
And I, you know, I read through it. I think it's reads very well. It's a pleasure to read. I like the way it's organized now.
Great photographs.
I like the way it looks. I think we're really, great pictures. Yeah.
Or did
I think
you
we're
take
doing, I think it's great. I think
Okay.
it's really going to be, it's really heading in the right direction. It's going to be a very good document. Yeah.
And Val recognizes the lower level conversion example.
Right, I saw that.
Yeah, right.
And if this is just a free-for-all, go for it. Yeah, and I only had a couple of high-level comments as well, and I can follow up by email on others. One is, I was interested in seeing the concept of, so not restating the green building ordinance in the design guidelines, and I know there's a lot of green building stuff that doesn't really relate to design, but I like the idea of trying to integrate, you know, what are all of the considerations that we want someone thinking about, and even if it's just like a reference to, you know, incorporating sustainable design features. I was specifically curious if we wanted to say anything about solar, and I don't know what exactly we might want to say, but even if it's, you know, just encouraging incorporation of
Absolutely.
solar into design, or, you know, whatever we can say that's consistent with the existing CAP and green building ordinance, I thought would be a helpful addition to this.
Perhaps we can put that under livability, because I think it
Yeah.
goes to kind of the, you know, the long-term improvements and functionality of a house.
Yeah. And, I mean, you're talking about solar panels.
Solar panels, yeah.
And,
Yeah, I know there's also.
I think it's a good point
Solar
that they
access.
really aren't mentioning here. And they raise design issues. And, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
There's ways to do it, and there's ways to do it that are really ugly.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's see, on the architectural character section, page 41, I guess. let me see what my comment was. Hold on. I've got to scroll to it. I think I just, in general, oh, yeah. Well, here, let me talk about page 37 first. This is the section 5 context. And, I don't have a design background. I'm very much a layperson with this kind of stuff. And I just thought more visuals would be helpful when we're trying to talk about, neighborhood context, like what are the best practices or things that we want to encourage. I loved the photos throughout and thought that was one place where more could be helpful. Section 6, accessory dwelling units. I thought this was a good start, but it seemed to be, it seems that there's more we could say about the ADUs. And I saw, Val, in your email, you had a couple comments about access, and I agree with those. And yeah, just more broadly, I just thinking a little bit more about what the city is really looking for, that's consistent with state law and whatnot. And then on, page 41, this was just another example where I thought some representative photos would be helpful for thinking about it from the perspective of a layperson who maybe is starting on a project and trying to look at the city's publications to understand, what they should be thinking about in the process.
4 different, Spanish Revival, Tudor.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. We can include a visual for each.
Yeah.
architectural
That's a good
style.
idea.
Because I can generally picture what each of those are, but only generally. And then one other.
Can I, while you're on that, can I just ask a question? In several of our conversations, McGregor is identified as a style. Is it?
It's one of these Albany local things. So McGregor was the builder, but he built in these different styles, and there's.
But when Jerry's here, she talks about it almost like it's a style, though, doesn't she?
Yeah, and the thing that's a little unique about that, so McGregor basically built, I think, from Oakland through Richmond, kind of scattered throughout, and there's different styles of houses that fit within the Tudor, Craftsman, or Spanish Revival, but they were all basically these, mass-produced by McGregor, and there's certain features that, like the picture window,
It's
the
used
triangle
the term
window.
storybook or story, was that storybook?
There are a couple of
There's a couple
storybook
of
houses in
storybook
Albany,
styles,
but
yeah.
I don't know if he did that or
remember
not.
that?
I'm not sure. I think that predates that. That was more the 20s, I think.
Well, I would defer to you, but as long as you consciously thought about whether you include it or not, just
Yeah.
because so many of the buildings here are, and some people have referred to it as a style, but.
Yeah. Yeah, the style is it's kind of what I think of is with the Spanish Revival McGregors, which I think are the more common ones in Albany, and there are a lot of little common features that are consistent from one to the other. The way they use tiles, and
Some of them even have
particular
stucco relief or like a
stucco
medallion
relief,
detail
yeah,
on the front
stucco
elevation.
approaches. Yeah, a lot of commonality, but
Or like the curved chimney at the front of the house.
yeah,
Right.
but
Sorry
not
to-
all
sorry
the
to
same.
interrupt you.
They weren't all the same. Yeah.
Okay. And then just one other conceptual comment. So so parking is obviously a big part of the visual interaction with a property from the street, but I like the idea of de-emphasizing it, or at least moving it down in the order, because it features very prominently right now, and it's more just a mindset kind of
Do you mean
comment.
like put it number 7?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
This is only your first planning commission meeting. All we do is park.
Yeah.
That's all we do.
No, I know. There's a lot of parking. I know, but I'm just, for thinking about
I like that
design,
suggestion.
I don't like thinking about designing around parking, right?
Well,
It's like-
and I think to actually go to that point, we talk about landscaping design as the first bullet and outdoor space as the last bullet.
Right.
We'd be
Yeah,
well
Yep.
served to actually put those
Yeah.
together and then move parking to the
Yeah.
bottom of the list.
Agreed.
And
It's a good comment, yeah.
and just to piggyback off that, I'll just throw this out there, devil's advocate. I don't know if necessarily we want to combine the outdoor space with landscaping, just because.
Oh, no, I don't want to combine it. I think
okay.
they're well served as two separate
change the order.
bullet points, but if we're going to talk about
Yeah.
landscaping, it can flow
They
into
flow into each
outdoor
other.
space.
Yeah.
And then my other comment was kind of similar to what you're saying, and possibly is that maybe a different name for outdoor space, just because that seems to be redundant with the landscape design.
Yeah, right.
And it seems like a majority of it's about like roof decks, balconies, rear yard decks. I don't know what, obviously we don't want to call it decks, but I don't know.
It's outdoor lifestyles.
Yeah.
All right for sunset.
Be careful, that might be in the.
California lifestyle.
But I don't know. Yeah, I don't have any specific suggestions.
And I had two questions about, well, one of the pretty simple one, I think, is, so this is focused on single-family homes. For multifamily, will that be, where is that treated? The San Pablo design guidelines? Or
Yeah, I think right now it's kind of broadly contained within San Pablo, but I think, early on in our discussion, because we deal so much with single-family residential, we thought it more appropriate to deal with multifamily as a, potentially a separate document in the future.
So we will not need a multifamily or mixed-use one?
I
I'm
think
just
it would be
curious,
something to pursue in the future, although I have to say, we've had so little
So few.
We
multifamily
have so little multifamily.
developments,
hard-
we've
it's hard
really
to know.
evaluated on a
We have our
case-by-case
opportunity sites,
basis.
there are, quite a few of those. They don't seem to be moving yet. but-
I guess separately, I do,
Yeah.
at some point, we've talked about this, trying to be more proactive about
Yeah.
trying to get developers on San Pablo or Solano
Yeah.
and facilitate that.
Right.
The second question is, I just follow a lot of stuff about development, and there's kind of this growing YIMBY movement to kind of get more, especially multifamily housing done. You don't
Growing
really
what?
see it in.
YIMBY.
Yes, in my backyard. So like, you follow it on Twitter, there's so much going on. San Francisco, Oakland,
Yeah.
the South Bay.
Uh-huh.
You haven't really seen it in Albany, but, they really focus on compatibility issues and how compatibility is used to kind of say no to a lot of projects. And so we do talk about it in context about being compatible, but I'm particularly sensitive in the areas, and maybe because our areas, we don't have that many single-family homes that abut the district that's in San Pablo or Solano around El Cerrito Plaza, but I wouldn't want to dictate I don't think the language we currently have about compatibility forecloses anything happening along there, but I'm just sensitive to make sure it's not interpreted that way.
Right.
No, it's only called out in the one context section, but.
Yeah, those considerations were a real big deal when we did the zoning code upgrades.
Yeah.
People who lived on Keynes and Adams
Like
were
the Safeway.
very active and attended a lot of meetings and were worried about, and, those exact issues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So since this is a single
What
family,
we've done or can do in here to, sort of follow up on that, I'm not sure, but, and well, look at Orange Fitness.
Right.
Boy, oh boy, we have one there, have a bad problem right there, yeah.
but in the context section on page 37, there is some mention here about compatibility with adjacent home creates cohesiveness, but is the intent here that's focused on somebody coming in with a single-family home project as opposed to a multifamily development or mixed-use development that abuts a single-family neighborhood? Which there's some limited, there is Keynes, but that's not, that's, at least, it has a different land use zone. But I'm thinking of the Safeway, for example, because it does seem to abut, when they had that project there. and it abuts
We do have daylight plane preservation requirements within the zoning code,
the
which
zoning code,
allow
yeah.
for
Stepping down. or-
stepping down the height as it abuts a residentially zoned district.
But yeah, I think your point is good, that we do have a few areas where you could have two-family or even quadruplexes directly adjacent to a single-family residence in those like medium-density corridors that come off of San Pablo. And I know I live in a medium-density area where we have condominium buildings basically on the whole block, and then we have residential right at the end there.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, if I hear your point right, it's, we want to make sure that, we don't accidentally make design guidelines that someone else weaponizes
Right.
to try
Yeah.
to,
Yeah, that's true.
stop other kinds of projects. So
maybe the solution
That's a
would
good
be
point.
to identify the daylight plane within the context section and give a visual example of how it works when there's, multifamily or, abutting a single family or that type of thing.
I can't in my mind think of an example, a specific example that's a good example in Albany, but I mean, you're pulling out addresses when Eric mentions one thing, so you know.
I could probably conjure up a
That probably
project
would
or
be
two
helpful.
where we would have a visual to incorporate.
Yeah, I can think of a couple, too.
The other thought too, and I mentioned at the last meeting, I thought I would take some pictures, try to find some examples of the hillside developments that were under the hillside regulations. We don't see that very often, but
Right.
I just haven't gotten around to it. I didn't do that. But I still think that might be a good idea, and there might be some photographs that could illustrate the references to the hillside overlay district. Yeah.
And this is 11 by 17 format?
It actually, so it prints in landscape at 8.5 by 11 as a PDF.
Yeah, that's what I did, but it just seemed like there's a lot of extra margin. So I thought maybe it was supposed to be printed on 11 by 17.
We had it set in Word to 11 by 17, and then we converted it to PDF, but we can work
Okay,
with
yeah,
the formatting, because
you're right,
I
it takes a
recall.
lot of extra space.
Yeah.
I think it reads well in this format. Yeah, I guess it does. There's some areas with a lot of extra space, but
Since if we're
it's nice margins. It's
we're
good.
talking about formatting, I was thinking I find it really hard to read blocks of text in this landscape format.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that columns would really.
Columns? Okay.
Columns or actually for the blocks of text, using bigger margins, just something to make it more readable.
And can you format it for a cell phone?
Right.
I don't know how difficult it is. But yeah, I mean, people aren't going to print this out for their house. They're not going to print out a 50-page document, right? They're not going to do it. But they might print out a couple.
And for the detailed comments that people may have, what would be helpful in terms of when you need something by? If you give us a timeline or a deadline, that would be,
Let's see, so today's the 24th?
yeah.
I'd say within the next 3 to 4 weeks.
For the next three, for what? I'm sorry.
If you have comments that you want to get to her,
Oh, really? Oh, in the next 3 or 4 weeks? Oh, okay.
I thought it'd be helpful to give everybody a
Okay.
deadline.
I was thinking like next week.
And
That's
Well,
my file was
but
correct.
I think, so Ann, I think I should
No,
come
this
in
was
and meet
from
with
the
you then
Fountainhead.
sometime maybe next week.
next week, yeah.
I can never get the last 3
And
pages.
let's do a
Like
photo
these,
list and so I can
Okay.
get busy on that.
Sure. No,
I'll
that's
be,
not, those are separate.
yeah. So June, I might have
this is the same
some
problem
time
with our new guidelines.
in the next next 3 weeks, next
they show
June,
us
in
the
June to do that. And so,
Page 52.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't get those to print.
Okay, great.
My own computer.
I mean, yeah, it looks like you guys are going in the right direction, and you've made a lot of great improvements. Yeah, I have a couple minor specific comments, but I can share those with
Email
you
them?
later.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Nothing.
No comments from David Arkin, huh?
yeah. I had mostly editorial comments, so I'll get them to you then.
Yeah, and we actually sent an architect home on Monday with a draft and asked her to go through it, as she's actually designing a house from the ground up, and we're curious to hear her feedback.
Oh, okay.
Nice work, guys.
Cool.
Good job.
Yep, it's great.
Okay, with that, I will close that item, and next is announcements, communications, and discussions.
So, 2 announcements, although one we sort of briefly discussed. Val had asked prior to tonight's meeting about an update on Orange Theory, and you'd heard from Mr. Gardner, who lives behind the property, that there continues to be ongoing noise issues. And so there's a very high probability that we may be bringing this back to you sooner than later because of these compliance issues. When their conditional use permit was approved, we included in there a 6-month review, and given that we're only at the 2-month mark, we're likely going to bring this back to you for a compliance review. So that's something just so that you're aware.
Okay, so that's the next step then.
That would be the next step. We give them a
And how about,
notice.
what is staff doing at the staff level? Is there anything you can do, or are you doing anything?
We've had contact with the property manager and then the business operator, because it's franchise-owned, is not local. They're in South Florida.
Yeah, right.
So that's, I think, contributed to getting these issues not remedied in a timely manner. So
Yeah.
we're going to send the official letter to let them know that here's your grace period to fix the issue, and we're going to bring this up for review as well.
Okay. And so when you'll do that, you'll kind of brief us on what options we have for revoking the permit?
Yes.
Maybe we should do that. I just think that should certainly be on the table. And, shut them down.
Yeah, and you're within your discretion. I mean, it is a conditionally allowed use, subject to them adhering to operating standards, and thus far, I think I mentioned this in a previous discussion, they opened the business without a city-issued business license. They offered their first classes at 5 a.m. when they had an explicit opening time pursuant to the use permit of 6 a.m. And, some of those things, they've obviously come in and taken care of the paperwork, but this issue with noise and noise impacts continues to be an ongoing concern.
Has there been any actual testing of the noise impact and decibel readings or?
So at the staff level, we haven't. The supposedly Orange Theory has, but I haven't seen what the results were of that testing.
Well, I have a noise meter, and I've been tempted to go up there, but then I thought, well, that's probably not smart on my part to get involved in that way, and it's not calibrated, and, it's not professional, and it wouldn't be good evidence. But I have used it a lot on EIR work, and to a good advantage, so I don't know. I could check on it, but, yeah.
Was this the project that they appealed some of our things?
Yes.
They appealed their own approval.
Yep.
Yeah, and then the
Because
city
of the
council.
conditions? Okay.
The city council did something different than what we had recommended, or they denied them, or?
They upheld the
us.
approval, but they added the condition that if the business was operating in full compliance for the first 6 months, at the time of permit review, they would consider the 5 a.m. opening time, or delegate to the commission the possibility of a 5 a.m. opening
Wow,
time.
so they're like shooting themselves in the foot, aren't they? That's not.
Okay.
And just to be clear, the city has a noise meter that any public can check out? I thought I heard that once.
We used to. Someone took it and did not return it. But then
And you know who it is, I'm assuming, right? But you don't wanna
Jeff
say.
knows who it is, but
Oh,
Jeff
okay.
also said, well, the apps have gotten really good. We don't need that. We can just,
Okay.
do it on our iPhones.
How is noise usually enforced?
It's actually done through the police department.
Yeah.
It's contained in
Yeah.
Chapter 8 of the municipal code.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
So does somebody have to request of them to go monitor that, or that's what comes to us somehow?
I think in this case, that's what would come to the commission. Noise is, you'd pretty much have to document a case with noise readings to show that there is a continued violation.
You
of
can
the
certainly
code.
advise the neighbors to call the police when they're bothered by the noise. And that, 'cause
Sounds like they called the fire department about trash.
Yeah, they've called the police before as
Yeah.
well.
Have they?
Yeah.
They have? Okay, good.
One of those catches, I don't know, I was at one point reading the code about the noise issues, and one of the kind of catches is that it has to be sustained for over there's a time period of 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So in theory, I mean, somebody could just, as soon as they realize somebody's there with the police, just turn the music off, and
That's right.
if it's not going on sustained, or they don't have evidence of it being sustained for longer than that. So it's one of those hard things to.
So
Because
should we-
While driving would get away from that, because it's only brief moments of noise.
Should we anticipate this coming back soon so that we can have the full discussion?
Yeah.
Since we're probably beyond the announcement
Yeah, right.
frame, and it's
You don't wanna-
9:35, so.
And I only had one other announcement, and this will be very brief. We are going to have a staff person from the city of El Cerrito speak to us on June 28th about parking maximums and the specific plan.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And projects in the
That's a good
pipeline.
idea. That's a good idea.
And Can I make an announcement?
Yes.
I just wanted to say hi, since
Yeah,
it's my first night here.
Introduce yourself
Yeah,
to
Throw the fire.
Megan Jennings, I'm a,
what's your name?
yeah, I know, right? I'm a land use attorney. I work at a big firm in San Francisco. I do entitlements work. I don't litigate for corporate campuses, hospitals, multifamily, renewable energy projects primarily. Bought our house in Albany in 2008 and have 2 kids in school at Cornell, and I'm happy to be here.
Great.
Nice.
We're happy
Thanks
to
for
have
joining
you.
us.
Yeah.
Glad you joined us. I guess with that, there's no more announcements or communications or discussion. Next meeting is June 14th. And with that, I will adjourn tonight's meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.